What just happened on the Stellar Gospel Music Awards stage wasn't just shocking, it was seismic. Because when Jamal Roberts and Jonathan McReynolds took the mic, they didn't just perform a duet, they lit a fuse that split the gospel world in half. One was the bold new face of fearless faith. The other? A respected voice of calm conviction. But together, in one unscripted, fire-filled moment, they delivered what some are calling a gospel revolution, and others are calling blasphemy. The internet is on fire. Producers are scrambling. And the backlash? It's already turning into a war. But what really happened that night? Was it a prophetic awakening? Or the night gospel music lost its way? Stay with me, because once you hear what insiders are now revealing about what really went down behind the curtain, you'll never look at the Stellar Awards, or these two artists, the same way again. Before we unpack what happened on that stage, we have to understand who Jamal Roberts really is, and why his name alone sends ripples through the gospel world. Because Jamal isn't just another up-and-coming gospel singer. He's a movement. A disruption. A walking contradiction to everything the traditional gospel establishment thought it had under control. Born and raised in a small Pentecostal church on the south side of Atlanta, Jamal's foundation was built on hymns, healing oil, and hard truth. His mother was a choir director. His grandfather, a fiery preacher. And from the time he could walk, Jamal was being groomed for the pulpit, or so they thought. But Jamal's calling didn't sound like the old school organ. It sounded like pain. Like purpose. Like rebellion wrapped in reverence. Instead of waiting for someone to hand him a mic, he grabbed one. From Instagram live streams in his bedroom to viral TikTok clips of him singing raw, unfiltered gospel lyrics in hoodies and sweatpants, Jamal made the world come to him. He didn't chase fame. He chased truth. And the world couldn't look away. By 2023, Jamal Roberts had already racked up millions of views, thousands of testimonies in his DMs, and a cult-like following of young people who said they finally saw someone who got it. Because while Jamal can sing, it's his message that cuts. He doesn't sugarcoat faith. He talks about depression in the pews. Addiction behind the choir robes. Questioning God between Sunday services. And for that, he's been celebrated by some. And hated by others. Traditional gospel gatekeepers have called him too raw, too urban, too Randy B. They whisper that he's blurring the line between the sacred and the secular. That he's turning ministry into performance. But his fans? They call him the voice of their generation. The artist who finally says what the rest are too scared to admit. So when Jamal Roberts walked onto that Stellar Awards stage in 2025, it wasn't just a performance. It was prophecy in motion. And what happened next would turn a single spotlight moment into a nationwide conversation. If Jamal Roberts is the spark, Jonathan McReynolds is the steady flame. A voice of calm. A presence of peace. A man who has spent over a decade earning gospel's trust, and who had every reason to play it safe. But on the night of the 2025 Stellar Gospel Music Awards, he didn't. Jonathan McReynolds has long been known as the thinking man's gospel artist. Since his breakout album Life Music in 2012, he's built his reputation on simplicity, soul, and storytelling. No flashy robes. Number 20-piece choir. Just a guitar, a notebook full of honest lyrics, and a willingness to say what most artists won't. His music feels like a journal entry. Soft-spoken confessions about doubt, discipline, heartbreak, and hope. He's not shouting from a pulpit, he's whispering from the edge of a broken heart. Songs like Make Room and People didn't just go viral, They became soundtracks for a generation of believers who craved realness over religion. Jonathan wasn't afraid to admit when he fell short. And somehow, that made his ministry even stronger. But not everyone saw it that way. Traditionalists have long accused Jonathan of being too casual, too mellow, and too modern for gospel. They say his stripped-down sound lacks the fire, the choir, the conviction. They claim he waters down the word to appeal to the mainstream. And yet, despite the criticism, Jonathan has thrived. He's graced the Grammy stage, collaborated across genres, earned respect from both bishops and Billboard. He's the bridge, the middle ground between the church pew and the culture. But that's exactly why his decision to share the stage with Jamal Roberts stunned the gospel community. Because Jonathan had nothing to prove, and everything to lose. Why would a seasoned, respected, award-winning artist align himself with a firebrand like Jamal? Someone unpredictable. Someone controversial. Someone who the old guard still doesn't trust? Some say it was a calculated risk, a strategic way to stay relevant. Others believe it was something deeper. A passing of the torch. A public declaration that gospel must evolve, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Whatever his reason, one thing was clear. When Jonathan McReynolds stood beside Jamal Roberts that night, it wasn't just a duet. It was a generational collision. And the shockwaves were just beginning. The moment was set. The lights dimmed, the audience hushed, and the announcer's voice echoed through the arena. Please welcome Jamal Roberts and Jonathan McReynolds. And just like that, everything shifted. No one knew what was about to happen, but they could feel it. The air got tighter. The energy turned electric. Even before a note was sung, people were already on the edge of their seats. First, the spotlight found Jonathan. Seated on a lone stool with his acoustic guitar, dressed in all black, understated and still, he began to strum a slow, soul-soaked chord progression. It was vintage Jonathan, introspective, intimate, gently ushering in a mood of reflection. His voice floated across the stage like a prayer whispered into silence. The audience, locked in, held their breath. But then, halfway through the verse, the atmosphere cracked. Jamal Roberts entered. And he didn't just walk onto the stage. He stormed in like a declaration. Draped in bold, artistic attire, bright colors, oversized sleeves, metallic accents, he looked more like a fashion rebel than a gospel artist. But that was the point. He didn't blend in. He didn't want to. He wanted to shake the room. And from the moment he opened his mouth, he did. Where Jonathan was calm, Jamal was kinetic. Where Jonathan invited stillness, Jamal brought fire. He didn't just sing, he testified. Growling runs. High notes packed with desperation. Movements that felt more like warfare than worship. His voice climbed over Jonathan's melody, twisting it, transforming it, dragging the song from contemplation into confrontation. You could feel the tension, not just in the music, but in the audience. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Phones came out. Some were stunned into silence. Others started whispering. A few rose to their feet, clapping mid-performance like it was Sunday morning revival. But just as many stayed seated, arms crossed, eyes skeptical. Because this wasn't the usual polished, reverent stellar performance. This was something raw. Something risky. Something real. As the tempo built, so did the drama. The background screen lit up with vibrant visuals, flashing lights, burning chains, protest signs, swirling clouds. The gospel stage started looking more like the BET Awards. But again, that was the point. Jamal wasn't there to conform. He was there to confront. Jonathan never flinched. He stayed seated, playing, singing, anchoring the chaos in melody. He let Jamal lead the charge, never overpowering, but never backing down either. Their contrast wasn't accidental. It was choreographed tension. Fire and calm. Disruption and discipline. And just when everyone thought they'd reached the climax of the song, something happened that wasn't in the program. They went off script. An extended bridge exploded out of nowhere. Jamal leaned into the mic, eyes closed, voice cracking with emotion, and began to speak, not sing, speak. A bold, unscripted spoken word monologue. He called out the gospel industry. He spoke of fake perfection. Of youth being silenced. Of needing space for realness, pain, and struggle in the church. He said, "You want us to sing, but not to speak. You want praise, but not pain. Well, I got both in my chest, and I'm not gonna bury either." And right there, the room divided. Some burst into applause, shouting, "Yes, Lord." Others sat frozen, lips pursed, brows furrowed, clearly offended. And just when you thought Jonathan might reel things back in, might cool the fire, he didn't. He leaned in and harmonized with Jamal's declaration. That was the moment. The cosign. The stamp. The veteran didn't silence the rebel. He joined him. And with that, the stage shook, and the gospel world would never be the same. The final note faded. The lights dimmed. Jonathan and Jamal embraced briefly, just a few seconds, one hand on the shoulder, no words spoken. And then, they walked off stage. But the room? It was still vibrating. You could feel it. This wasn't the kind of performance you clap politely for and move on. It wasn't just another musical set in a lineup of gospel greats. It was a rupture. A shot fired straight through the heart of tradition. And it left the audience visibly shaken. Some rose to their feet immediately, cheering, shouting, praising like they'd just experienced a revival. Others sat motionless, arms folded, lips tight, eyes darting. Some applauded, but slowly. Hesitantly. As if unsure whether what they just witnessed was ministry or mutiny. And the division didn't stop at the edge of the stage. Cameras panned through the audience, catching everything. One gospel legend in the front row was wiping away tears, visibly moved. 2 rows behind, a well-known choir director shook his head in disapproval, mouthing what many at home would later swear was, "This ain't gospel." Even as the next award was announced, nobody was really paying attention. The auditorium was buzzing, but not from joy. It was tension. Electricity. Confusion. Whispers filled the aisles. "You saw that? Was that planned? Did he just call out the church on live TV?" But while those inside the room processed it in real time, the internet exploded. Within minutes, clips of the performance had been uploaded to Twitter, now X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And before the night was even over, hashtags like #Stella's 2025, #Jamal Roberts, #Jonathan McReynolds, #This ain't Sunday morning were trending globally. Some users called it the most revolutionary gospel moment of the decade. Others said it was a disgrace, a circus, or blatant rebellion dressed in praise. The viral memes hit fast. One had Jamal standing in fire, labeled a Holy Ghost. Another showed Jonathan calmly strumming while everything behind him burned. The caption read, "Jonathan watching the gospel industry explode in real time." But the commentary wasn't all jokes. Fans, pastors, artists, and critics were posting long threads, deep reflections, and heated debates. Some praised Jamal for saying what nobody else had the courage to say. Others questioned whether the Stellar Awards had just turned into an entertainment spectacle. Even respected figures from outside the gospel world started chiming in. One major R&B artist tweeted, "That's how you bring truth to the stage. Jamal Roberts is different." Meanwhile, a longtime gospel radio host posted, "We don't need rebellion in robes. Gospel is about reverence, not ratings." The line had been drawn. On one side, a rising generation claiming Jamal and Jonathan had finally made gospel real again. On the other, a traditional guard demanding respect for the sacredness of the platform. But while fans were clashing online, the real drama was unfolding backstage. Because according to whispers from insiders, what happened on stage wasn't what the producers expected. Not at all. And what they allegedly tried to do behind the scenes would only deepen the controversy. While social media exploded and fans across the country debated what they had just witnessed, backstage at the Stellar Gospel Music Awards, chaos was quietly unfolding. Because according to multiple anonymous sources close to the production, what viewers saw on stage that night wasn't just bold, it was unplanned. At least, not by the producers. Behind the velvet curtains and perfect lighting, showrunners were scrambling. People with headsets were frantically whispering into mics. The stage manager reportedly looked stunned. And at one point, a floor director allegedly shouted, "What is he doing? That's not in the rundown." You see, the original set list that had been approved, meticulously reviewed for timing, content, and flow, did not include the extended bridge, the impromptu spoken word segment, or the raw, unapologetic call-out to the gospel industry. Especially not during a live national broadcast. According to two sources who claim to have been present in the control room, there was serious internal debate in the final moments of the performance. One senior executive reportedly suggested cutting Jamal's mic mid-speech. Another warned it would cause more damage than letting him finish. In the end, they let it ride, not out of support, but out of fear of creating an even bigger scandal in real time. And here's where it gets even more dramatic. After the performance, when Jamal and Jonathan exited the stage, they were not met with congratulations. They were met with questions. A staff member allegedly approached Jamal immediately and asked, "Did you rewrite your arrangement? Why didn't you stick to the script?" Jamal's response, according to a witness, "The spirit led. That's all I'm gonna say." Jonathan, ever calm, reportedly offered only a nod and a quiet, "It needed to be said," before walking past the commotion without another word. But behind the scenes, things weren't cooling down. Producers were divided. Some were furious. They felt blindsided, betrayed. One anonymous crew member reportedly said, "They hijacked the show. That was a hijacking disguised as a duet." Others, though, were quietly impressed. One executive producer, off the record, allegedly admitted, "I didn't see it coming. But I can't lie, it was powerful." Still, that didn't stop the damage control. Calls were reportedly made to PR teams before the show even ended. Social media interns were told not to amplify clips of the performance on the official Stellar Awards pages. And a few whispers even hinted that Jamal may not be invited back next year, at least not without a serious conversation. But the real shock? Despite the chaos, despite the risk, despite the backlash, Jonathan never apologized. In fact, he reportedly told one staff member backstage, "I stand by it. Gospel needs to be honest." or it dies. That one sentence echoed through the building like a bomb. Because this wasn't just about Jamal anymore. Jonathan McReynolds, the industry's golden child, the trusted voice of balance and reverence, had just backed the most controversial moment in Stellar Awards history. And that made everyone in power very nervous. What happened on stage wasn't just a moment. It was a challenge to the system. A call to tear down the carefully built walls of polished perfection and let gospel get messy, real, and raw again. But now the question wasn't just what happened. It was, what happens next? In the days that followed, the performance became more than just a trending topic, it became a battleground. Supporters hailed it as a spiritual awakening. They said Jamal Roberts was the voice the church had silenced for too long. That his raw truth, paired with Jonathan's quiet strength, was exactly what gospel needed to survive in a world drowning in superficial praise. Critics, however, weren't buying it. This wasn't ministry, one radio host said. This was rebellion. This was showboating. This was disrespectful. Online think pieces flooded in. Bloggers called it a prophetic collision. Others labeled it, the night gospel jumped the shark. But underneath the noise, something deeper was happening. Young fans, millions of them, felt seen. Older fans, many of them, felt betrayed. And the gospel world, which had long tried to keep one foot in tradition and one foot in innovation, was now being forced to choose. Did this performance mark the death of reverence? Or the birth of revival? Either way, a line has been drawn. Jamal Roberts didn't just sing. He spoke out. Jonathan McReynolds didn't just play along. He stood beside him. And the 2025 Stellar Gospel Music Awards will go down in history as the night gospel music stopped playing it safe and started asking the hard questions. The stage may be empty now. But the fire? It's still burning. And what happens next?